Hi, students. I want to talk to you for a few minutes about ethos and how the appeals for ethos can affect an argument. So, we've talked about the rhetorical appeals, you've read about them, and you've read some of the resources that I've connected to our shell about them. But this kind of gives you a quick breakdown or a cheat sheet about how these appeals work in argument. So, we've talked about pathos being the appeal to emotion and how that can work, and I want to talk about ethos, which can be an appeal to character. It can also include the trustworthiness of the arguer, how educated, reliable, credible, honest, and fair that arguer is perceived as being. And just like with pathos, this can be subjective. So there can be someone who is arguing, and one audience member might find that person to be very fair, honest, and credible, while another person may not. The facts of their education or experience may not be subjective or disputable, but how they are perceived, their character, might be a huge factor. And Aristotle has often said that although logo should be the backbone of any good argument, that ethos is really the most important part, because if you don't believe someone, you don't believe what they're saying, then anything they say is tainted. And no matter what evidence they give you, you might find a way to not believe it or to question it or be skeptical of that. And we've seen this um, in politics before. There's something called confirmation bias in sociological terms, and that's often when people who strongly align themselves with a certain political party can hear something that someone says from their party and believe in it and believe it's totally true and support it. But if that same thing had been said by someone from the opposing party or the opposite party, then they would not believe it. They would be skeptical of it or find a way around it. This happens, I think most obviously in political seasons when it comes to issues like even just constant issues like the price of gas or the rate of unemployment is that if you have someone in office that you love who's the president, and the unemployment rate is low, then you go, well, that is because Donald Trump has brought more jobs to America and he has really been responsible for making sure everybody has jobs. But if you don't like Donald Trump, then you might point to all the other factors that can influence job growth and talk about how, no, it was on an upward trajectory when Barack Obama was president and he was the one who really turned it around. And the job growth we're seeing now is just the dividends of all the programs that he started while in office, and now they're bearing fruit. And, or the economy is stronger because of outside influences in the global economy. I mean, I'm not an economist, so I'm just pulling things I've heard. I don't have answers for you. But what I want to point out here is that ethos is subjective, that a lot of times our own biases can get in the way of us perceiving the true character of someone. And so we want to be aware of that going in. If we are against an argument, we tend to find ourselves being more skeptical of it and critical of it. Is it because the arguer really is not trustworthy or is not giving us logical evidence? Or is that our own biases at work? Do we have something against that speaker or arguer because of our own assumptions about them, whether they are, based in fact or not? So, I know I have people in my family on both sides of the political spectrum, liberal and conservative, and it's amazing how, the the folks who are liberal, anything a conservative says is fooey and or hooey, and then the opposite side is that anything, my conservative family members, anything that someone they perceive to be liberal says something, it is nutso, and so I'm using really kind words instead of the words they use, but it just gives you an idea. And this is not always the case, right? I mean, in the ideal and in an academic argument, we hope that we could encounter someone with different views and we could deal with them logically. We could say, I reject this evidence that you put forward. It's not about my biases against you, or something in your character leads me to believe that you're not trustworthy, but it's not so much of an emotional knee-jerk reaction about our own assumptions. So here I gave a few different examples of ethos and how it works. So the things you're asking yourself when you're analyzing ethos for your rhetorical analysis are looking at the arguer and even the publication's credibility to an extent, right? Because I know, just as an example, my husband and I the other day were talking about protein. We've been working out a lot. We bought these protein shakes and they're really tasty. And so we're wondering, like, can you have too much protein? Like, is that bad for you? Or is there even a certain point at which the amount of protein you ingest in a day, just after a certain amount, it doesn't really do anything to your body? You just get rid of it and what's the line for protein? So we were looking up sources, and I was like, oh, here's something from the New York Times. And so I started to read to him about that because the New York Times to me is a credible newspaper. And he's like, oh, no, wait, here's WebMD. And I was like, oh, WebMD, okay. And then we're on livestrong.com. These are all runnersworld.com. These are websites that we're familiar with and that we trust. And so, we're not going to some Joe Schmo's message board, even if he says he's, been exercising for years, because we don't know him. We don't know if he's really trustworthy or credible or not. But if we know that the publication, the website, or the person who is arguing is credible, then we're going to tend to want to believe them or put our trust in them. If we don't know who they are, we may want to Google them and find out their credentials or experience regarding the issue. So, credentials can include work experience, education, personal experience, um, those kind of things. Is the figure well known? Again, if you know them, you might already have assumptions about them and their credibility, and you may even want to research them more to make sure that those assumptions are not getting in your way, that they are true or based in fact, not just in belief. And then credibility can also be established through word choice and tone. Um, I know I was somewhere the other day, I was at the dentist office, and there was someone helping me, and he was using a lot of slang and cursing while he was prepping for me to get my crown put on my tooth. And albeit you can be a dental technician and curse and be perfectly capable at your job, but his lack of professionalism made me question, and made me wish the doctor was in the room while he was getting all these tools ready, because I was thinking, does this person really know what he's talking about? He doesn't seem very well versed in this office culture or in dental hygiene, or, I was just getting kind of nervous. I was nervous going in anyway, but I was getting more nervous because I was starting not to trust him because of his word choice. Now, again, is that fair? Maybe it's not. Maybe, again, word choice may have his vocabulary may have little or nothing to do with his abilities as a dental technician. But fair or unfair, I was looking at that and I was analyzing that and making assumptions about his character and credibility based on that. A few of these images I put here, I'm not going to go through all of them, but obviously Donald Trump, the president, so the office itself carries a certain amount of credibility for most people. And I find, Trump to be just such an interesting person in terms of ethos because he is so divisive, right? Or divisive, however you would like to say it. I have a neighbor on Facebook who's always saying he hates all politicians, but whatever Donald Trump says, he believes. I mean, he will say that explicitly. And he has a lot of faith and trust in them. And this neighbor of mine also, he's retired now, but he worked construction a lot of his life, and he was in sales, that kind of thing. So I think he really identifies with Donald Trump in a lot of ways, and he tends to be very conservative. So a lot of those things make Donald Trump appealing to him. Similarly, there are many people for whom Barack Obama is a trustworthy person. So if Barack Obama says something, they might there's different lines in the spectrum. There's just outright trust. Anything this person says is gospel and you believe them. And then there's, trust but verify. So you trust, but you probably want to look up some things and make sure what they're saying is true. And then there's skepticism, where you might be critical or a little bit questioning what someone says. And then there's just outright disbelief, where I have, again, members of my family and friend circle who anything Barack Obama says, if they went out and said, the sun shines in the sky sometimes, these people would be like, liar. So, and we don't want to be that way. We want to be intellectuals, and we want to research our arguers and make a sound judgment on whether or not they have the credibility to talk about their subject matter. And I put Tiger Woods in there because I think, again, credibility can differ depending on what the person is writing or speaking or persuading about. So if Tiger Woods is trying to persuade us that a certain kind of golf club is the best golf club for teeing off, we might say, oh yeah, he's totally experienced. That I believe him. He has a lot of credibility when it comes to this issue. He appeals to ethos well. But if Tiger Woods is giving us marital advice, I don't know if you remember all that hubbub a while back, then we might say, not so much. Similarly with Bill Cosby. If Bill Cosby is telling you about comedy and how to tell a joke and timing, you might say, yes, he's very credible. But if he's telling you about how to um, have a happy marriage and be a good person, maybe you're going, no, thanks. So you can hold that advice. And we all have friends like this, I think, too, or relatives, people we know in the world who have certain characteristics. My brother has done very well for himself in business, and he majored in accounting. So when my brother gives me business or financial advice, I listen to him more than I listen to my other good friend who majored in the humanities like me and has always been very artistic. Now I go to her, she's amazing, especially I've seen her house, at putting a room together. So if I want an opinion on, what kind of couch to buy or whether I should buy wallpaper or these cushions or that cushions, I will go to her because she has experience in that realm and she has demonstrated good taste. My brother, not so much. I would never go to him for that. He's horrible taste. Anyway, you don't care. So the other images here, just again, sometimes just the way a person looks or is perceived can give us a sense of how trustworthy they are. Or the Pope, it will depend upon the audience's religious beliefs, probably, about how much faith they put in the Pope and what the Pope says. If you're Catholic, you probably listen to the Pope and really put a lot of stock in what he says. If you're atheist or Buddhist or Muslim, you may not put as much faith in what he says. And I did want to play this little clip from Frozen because I don't know, we say this all the time in my house when we don't believe somebody.
Sven, go! Go!
What are they?
Wolves!
Wolves? What do we do?
I got this. You just don't fall off and don't get eaten.
But I want to help!
No!
Why not?
Because I don't trust your judgment.
Excuse me?
Who marries a man she just met?
It's true love!
Whoa! Whoa! Whoa!
Christopher!
It's Kristoff! Ow! Ah!
Stop!
Okay, so that was a really short clip, but we say that all the time. I don't trust your judgment. Who marries a man that they met 24 hours ago? And so, if somebody in our house does something, I'm trying to think of the latest example that I don't know, sometimes my son will be trying to tell me how to cook, and he's 9 years old, and he recently had an incident with the microwave where he set off the fire alarm. And so I say, I don't trust your judgment. Who sets a piece of pizza on fire and puts it on for 5 minutes in the microwave? So trusting someone's judgment is part of ethos and credibility. So the benefits of ethos is if the arguer is trustworthy, then the audience is more likely to agree with him or her. But if the arguer does not establish strong ethos, then the audience will not give the argument as much consideration. We see this all the time in pop culture through celebrity endorsements or well known endorsements, that kind of thing in advertising. Um, whether it's a particular singer or actor or something like that, or sometimes even scientists, right? So that we might say, even if there's a NASA scientist talking about global warming, there's a whole generation of kids who have grown up watching Bill Nye the Science Guy. So if he says something, it's like gospel to them. Or Neil deGrasse Tyson is a well known physicist. So if he says something about global warming, you know, we may not, as lay people and not scientists, be able to understand all the ramifications of how warming works. But if they tell us that this is what the truth is, then we are likely to uphold it and follow it. So, and lastly, I thought this was kind of funny too. Um, is Little South Park for you. Cartman, we can't just attack the other side, stand in Kyle's credibility. We need to present our side of the debate. So if you find an argument where they are attacking the other side more than presenting their side of the debate, then that might be something to look at too as far as the arguer's credibility. Are they credible enough, or are they just trying to knock down the other side? All right, I hope that was informative. Students, please reach out if